I'm James Lemons. I'm the Executive Director of the Lake Placid Center for the Arts in Lake Placid, New York. If you're driving to the north and you hit the Canadian border, you've gone about 30 minutes too far. So turn around and come back down. I use he, him pronouns. Lake Placid sits on the ancestral home of the Akwesasne, and we honor and respect and give thanks to their contributions that we use to this day. I am a fair-skinned, dark-haired guy that is slowly going grayer and grayer as time progresses, in a black sweater in front of some bookshelves. Bobby, I'll turn it back over to you.
Thanks, James. Just a little bit of context and housekeeping. If I could ask all of you to, if you know how to use the chat function, to go ahead and put your name and your role and organization in the chat, so we can all get to know each other that way rather than going around and introducing, which would take up all of our time. We'll also use the chat throughout our time together today to ask questions. We're going to have a Q&A at the end where our two guests, as well as James, myself, and Kristen, Willie, will attempt to answer any question you might have that comes up during the conversation. So thank you for being here. I would also say, as part of this, I know we have presenters here. We have folks from all parts of the field, as well as booking agents and managers. We're going to do a session next week, next Thursday, the 26th, about surviving and thriving at conferences. So we hope you'll all join us for that as well. Starting off, James is going to give us the general overview of the presenting field, setting the stage with some definitions and that sort of thing. James?
Thanks, Bobby. I think, as the title suggests of the session, we want to say, on behalf of all of our colleagues and those of us who've been in the field, both for a relatively short amount of time and those who've been doing this for years, welcome to the field. The session is really focused on an introduction for those who are new to the presenting, booking, touring industry, or those of you who may find yourself in new positions within the field. And we want to say we are happy and thrilled to have you as colleagues, whether you are in a new position or whether you're entering this for the first time and figuring out what the heck is going on. We are so happy to have you as a part of our cohort and to get to know you and your organization and the work that you are doing over the next coming years. We look forward to hopefully seeing you at conference in January, and really just excited to welcome you and to grow our own industry connections by having you be a part. So as we get going, we wanted to share just in a very, very high level 350,000 square foot view of the field, and really kind of provide some foundation and some anchors for everyone, so that as we have our conversation today, we all acknowledge and know kind of what we're talking about. So Willie, if you could help by pulling up the general overview PowerPoint. There we go. So welcome to the field. And we'll switch to the next one. Next slide, please. As we kind of ground ourselves and provide some context for the field, I think this Laurie Anderson quote really is indicative of the way many of us feel about what we do. Performance art is about joy, about making something that's so full of kind of a wild joy that you really can't put into words. And really, I think it's imperative that as we move through the conversation, we really ground ourselves in what we are trying to do collectively, together, and by working together, really what we are attempting, which is to provide places for audiences and artists to come together to experience something that they would not have been able to experience without our work, and to really acknowledge that whether it's on a stage, whether it's in an unconventional space, whether it's virtual or online, you play a part in providing joy through artistic expression on both sides of that stage. Whether you're marketing or raising funds or pushing paperwork, it really all moves back to that singular performance art and that singular bit of joy. And when times are challenging, because they're going to be challenging in this field at some point, I think it's really imperative that we remember what it is we're trying to do and really ground ourselves in that joy. Willie, we could switch to the next frame, please. So what is presenting? A performing arts presenting organization is an organization, or it may be a department or program of a larger organization, as many of our university friends may be, that works to facilitate exchanges between artists and audiences through creative, educational, and performance opportunities. The work that these artists perform is produced outside of the presenting organization. And we acknowledge that there is often an overlap between organizations that present, but also produce aspects of their work. So really, presenting is presenting. What we want to acknowledge and really lift up is that over the last number of years, the definition of presenting is becoming a little more permeable and a little more adaptive, including the use of unconditional spaces, of how we present to audiences, how artists connect that way. Really, since the pandemic, that shift has been accelerated, and we're only really now beginning to understand the ramifications of that. So in some ways, this definition of presenting may be a little old-fashioned, but really at the heart, we are not necessarily creating most of the work that we're doing. The artists do that. Presenting is taking that artist's work and connecting it with audiences. Willie, can we jump forward? Presenting can take many forms, and presenting organizations can take many forms. Some you have performing arts centers, or PACs, which are independent standalones. University presenters, where your series may exist within the auspices of a university setting. Festivals, which we all try and attend as many as possible because they're fun and we can see each other. Local arts agencies, or organizations serving specific audiences, whether that is a specific cultural heritage that you're lifting up through the work, or perhaps you are serving a unique audience with for unique special abilities. Really, organizations have the ability to self-define what those specific audiences are, and the artists that they're connecting to those specific audiences. Willie, next, please. Special note, partially because they're found in diverse institutional settings, presenting organizations are often unrecognized as a distinct organizational form. Performing arts producing organizations, so theater troupes, dance companies, musical groups, and operas that employ artists in the production of art, are the obvious form that we think about when we describe the performing arts. However, entities that present these producing companies, often when the producing companies are touring to different cities, escape the attention of the general population, the arts research community, and many institutional funders. So that's a very fancy way of sometimes, as presenters, we are the hidden component within the ecosphere of the arts. Oftentimes, if an audience may be coming to your series, they may think about that they're coming to see an artist and think less about the organization that is expanding the resources to present that artist. So as a result, sometimes funding, sometimes especially artistic research into the presenting field. A year ago when we said this, we would even lift up compensation studies, which has been remedied partially. Thank you to Krista and their work and APAP's work. But that has been lacking. We're only really beginning to see an investment in the presenting field to kind of fill some of these gaps that have been with us for a number of years. Willie, next, please. Some quick statistics about the field. 32% of presenting organizations, $100,000 budget or less. 37% have a budget of 100 to $500,000, and 20% have a budget of 500 to 2 million. So, we do have an ecosphere that is very varied, and it's not all taken up by those specifically large organizations with enormous budgets like sometimes we think of when we think of the presenting field. there is a wide variety of types of presenters, from presenting programs from our facilities with programs to institutions. Again, that's a much more even, in some ways, layout of percentages across the board. Interesting to note that 41% of expenditures in presenting organizations are for artistic salaries, travel, and artist fees. So the largest percentage is really going out to compensate the artists, who we will note still are underpaid for the work that they do in many, many instances. Presenters, at least nonprofit presenting organizations, their revenue comes from a variety of aspects, but we will note, on average, the largest portion of revenue is from contributed income, as opposed to an individual aspect of earned revenue, which still makes the reliance upon us to fundraise from our various fundraising partners, whether that's individuals, foundations, or corporate, to fill the gap to make our work possible. We'll also note that this field-wide study is about 15 years old, and that the dueling coronavirus pandemic and the racial justice pandemic have changed our field in ways that we're just now beginning to understand and really beginning to quantify from statistics. Willie, next, please. Random facts, and we'll move through these quickly so that Bobby can introduce our guests. Presenting organizations with budgets of less than $500,000 outnumber organizations with budgets of more than $2 million by 6 to 1. So if you are at a smaller, in quotation marks, presenting organization with a budget of under $500,000, you are in by far the majority of the sizes. That small and mid-size cohort is larger than you think, and you have more friends and colleagues who understand what you're going through than you can possibly imagine. Freestanding nonprofit organizations outnumber hosted presenters 2 to 1 despite their size differences. Rural presenting organizations, and you can think of rural as 20 miles or more from a highway. They are no less likely to present international artists than presenting organizations in urban areas. However, they are less likely to process the visas. Medium and large size presenting organizations are more likely to own their venue than they are to rent it, while smaller and small budget organizations are more likely to rent. Half, roughly, of all presenters own their own venues. And pre-pandemic, presenters welcomed more than 300 million attendees with more than 5 billion in earned income. Most used these to present artists, and contributed income totaled over $3.7 billion. So you are in an ecosphere that has significant economic impact amongst our country, and really one that provides a significant investment in artistic output. Willie, next. Thank you. And with that, Bobby, I'll pitch it back over to you.
Thanks, James. Next, we're going to have Krista Bradley from the Association of Performing Arts Professionals talk about APAP, how APAP got started, and what it does for us in our industry. Krista, welcome, and thanks for having us all here today.
Oh, well, thank you. Thanks, Bobby, and thanks, James. Hi, everybody. It's good to have you here, and it's good to have you as part of this field. I'm Krista Bradley. I'm Director of Programs and Resources at APAP, the Association of Performing Arts Professionals. I use the pronoun she, her. I'm a brown-skinned Black woman with short, dark black hair. I'm wearing dark blue glasses, and I have a Peloton that I haven't been on for the last 5 days in the background, along with a window. So I wanted to talk to you a little bit about about APAP and what we do and the field writ large, based on what James just shared. This is a field that has been in development and codified over a long time. Even though you're new, it's been around for a while and changed names and evolved. So I want to just give you a little background on that. So In 1957, a group of 35 presenting professionals founded the Association of College and University Concert Managers to meet the needs of education-based arts presenters. So these were folks that were across the country, a lot of them in the Midwest, that found themselves doing very similar things, bringing artists to university and college-based campuses to present individual artists. That group of 35 evolved into a much larger group, but APAP's founding, at least, was based in the university and college concert manager presenter circle. Since then, we have changed our name and we have expanded. Today, we are called the Association of Performing Arts Professionals. 7 years ago, we were called the Association of Performing Arts Presenters. And I want to just share with you why we made that change. So as James and Bobby shared with you, there are lots of different people that fall under the presenting, booking, and touring family. There are organizations such as presenters and venues that are responsible for bringing in the artists, for curating who comes to their community and who's on their stage. They're the agents and managers who are so critical to helping ensure that those artists get there, that they're routed, that they get the money that they're due, and there are the artists, obviously, that are really responsible for making those connections with audiences. And oftentimes, I think over the last 40 or 50 years, that the stress was really on the presenter. The presenters are the ones that are curating and identifying the artists that they want to bring to their communities. And so there was a lot of, maybe the power dynamic was a little bit leaning in that one area where presenters were really considered more important, which was never really true. And we finally all realized that and decided to make it more official and clarify that this is an ecosystem. You can't do one without the other. Presenters can't do their work without artists, and presenters, agents and managers can't do their work without artists and presenters as well. So we changed our name to the Association of Performing Arts Professionals that more readily reflected the true nature of this field and the fact that this is a relationship-based field. We rely on each other to make the work happen and to do the work that we're called to do. So currently today, APAP is a membership, advocacy, and arts service organization. We are the service organization serving this industry. We have about 1,200 organizational and institutional members, and we serve about 5,000 performing arts professionals every year. Our membership is the widest of all of the performing arts service organizations. James talked about the other disciplines like opera and theater and chamber music. All of those have their own arts service organizations that help their field and their professionals do the work. We are probably the most diverse. We're not genre specific. We are multidisciplinary. And that makes us both very large in terms of all the different kinds of organizations that we encompass, but it also somehow makes us invisible, as James talked about. Our membership includes the presenters and venues, includes producing companies, artist management companies, booking agencies, individual artists, consultants, and producers. And our mission is to develop and support a robust performing arts presenting, booking, and touring field and the professionals that work within it. So that's a little bit of background about who we are. The other things that we do, I want to just share a little bit before I turn it back over to our team hosts here. We're probably best known for our conference, but we do a whole lot more. So we support the field through professional and leadership development opportunities, through arts advocacy. We represent this presenting industry along with our colleagues in the cultural advocacy group to lobby and advocate for our field and the needs for making sure we can do the work, whether it's visa work or whether it's SVOG and getting money back into this field after the pandemic. We also get resources to put back into the field. We often do regranting. We we partner with national foundations to launch special initiatives that we feel are important for the field at a current time. Some examples of that include reopening and being able to get millions of dollars back into the field on to try to help venues reopen and tours resume safely. We also do a lot of resource sharing, and we do reports and initiatives that are timely, such as the Arts Compensation Project that James and Bobby intimated at the very top of this call. We both support the field and we like to lead the field, so that we, as a service organization, and our staff is constantly scanning and looking at what's happening, across the industry, and talking to lots of people. And that allows us to kind of make meaning and make connections in ways that maybe our members can't always, because their heads are down doing the work. And so it's a great privilege and a call for us to be able to serve this group of people, and to hear what things are important to you and to be able to be responsive. We do that through a lot of year-round programming, and one of the key things that we do is through that conference that we do every January in New York. It is the APAP and OIC conference that attracts the largest convening of the performing arts live industry to New York. And we look forward to seeing you there. It usually attracts about 3,000 or more people. It is the place where we celebrate the 4 pillars of what we do, which is building community, commerce, and making sure that the business of our industry is happening, networking and learning is happening, so that you all get the skills and information you need to do your job, and discovery, which is all about who is in this field and connecting you to new artists, new agents and managers, new rosters, because we are in the stage of major change and evolution. So that's a little bit about APAP. I hope I didn't go over time. I hope that it was engaging, and I'm going to turn it back over to Bobby and James.
Thank you, Krista.
Sure.
You did not go over time. You were right on time as usual. In this next section, we're going to dig into the different roles that exist in our industry and talk a little bit about each one, and also have our guests talk about their roles. Willie, if you can bring up the other PowerPoint, and you can skip actually directly to slide 3 if you'd like. So Krista talked, she mentioned this phrase, this field is an ecosystem. That's absolutely true. It takes a village of people from all around the world in all these different roles to bring the artists to the audience. So we're going to talk a little bit about those roles. We titled these slides originally external partners and internal partners. I think that's a little bit inaccurate, and I think we're going to change it to local and from away in the next version of this, because really what we're talking about here is, in a presenting context, typically there's a local organization. There's a phrase, all politics is local. I think the phrase can also be applied that all arts is local. Presenters are typically in community and bringing artists from other places or sometimes from their local community to their audiences, but we're the bridge there. So we'll switch back and forth between slides 3 and 5, but describe this. So first off, of course, at the top of the list is artists. Artists are the reason we're here. They're the reason we all do this work. Our work is to amplify their work in many cases. I can tell you that artists can be defined in so many different ways that we don't have the ability probably to describe all of them here. And I can tell you, after 20 years in this business, that when you get a fixed idea of what an artist is and what they can do in your head, someone will come along and expand that idea. So the artists, typically performing artists, are why we do what we do. And are the key to our industry. So that's the first group of people we'll talk about in our ecosystem. And then the second most important group is a group that's not listed here. Can anybody guess what it is and put it in the chat? It's the audience. We don't have anything. If a tree falls in the forest or you present the greatest performance in the world and no one's there to see it or to engage with it, nothing has happened. So the audience is the second most important part of our ecosystem. A lot of our work is focused around, as presenters, figuring out the audience, figuring out how to reach the audience, figuring out how to make sure that we remove as many barriers to participation as possible for our audience. So one thing you will learn as you go through this is always think about the audience. So we'll talk about the audience. So after those two very important parts of the ecosystem, what do you think the third most important thing is? Fuel, typically funding, money. So we talk about funders and funding sources as an important part of the arts. In the statistics that James showed, you can see that fundraising, raising money that doesn't come directly from ticket sales or from selling things, is a key part of any arts organization's budget. That funding can come from a incredibly wide group of places. You may, of course, know the National Endowment for the Arts, which is your tax dollars here in the United States that are funneled typically through the National Endowment for the Arts down through state arts agencies and in some cases regional arts agencies. And that funding eventually reaches presenters, artists, and fuels that work. So that would be public funding because it's done publicly through grants that are done from governmental sources. There are also private foundations who have it as part of their missions to support artistic work. You may hear about the Mellon Foundation, the Ford Foundation, the Doris Duke Foundation. These funders have resources, and through many different means, application processes, grants, they give that money to artists and presenters and people in our ecosystem to fuel the work that we do. So you have private funding and then public funding that as two of the main sources for funding. Then you get to individual funding. You may have people in your audience that have resources that buy tickets and attend your events or live in your community and like what your organization does, and that inspires them to, if they're asked to give funding to your organization to support your work. So private funding, public funding, and individual or individual donors are three of the main ways that you can get the fuel that supports your work. And then, of course, many of our institutions, you get money from ticket sales. You get money from the concession stand, you get money from the merch table, and you may get money from renting your venue to people who use it for various things. In one of my early jobs, I ran a little jazz club in a tiny town in northeastern Oklahoma. And the way that we funded ourselves was by doing wedding receptions for it seemed like in some cases everybody who got married in northeastern Oklahoma. So I would often be there on a Saturday as everybody hung up lace and things and brought in the cake and did wedding receptions, but it paid for a lot of really great jazz concerts. So those other funding sources where you take a resource and use it to support the mission specific work that you do is also important. So all of those sort of come together to make up the funding pie that allows us to all operate. We're going to talk specifically about different roles of presenters in the next part, but presenters writ large, there are many different nuances within the people who work as presenters, which we're going to talk about in a second. But we are really, if you're a presenter, you're the bridge between the artists and the audiences and communities that you serve. You plan the performances, often choosing which artists come to your community. You market those performances, making sure that people know about them. You raise the money to support them from the funders we've talked about, and sometimes manage the venues, sweep the floor, replenish the toilet paper, and otherwise support these performances. And also to provide context for the performances, often through engagement events, master classes, conversations, opportunities for the artists to do things off stage, which we'll go into detail about in a minute. The other part of that bridge between the artists and audiences communities are agents and managers. They're incredibly important to our business. If you think about choice making of artists, agents and managers build rosters of artists that they then talk to presenters about and then facilitate those artists getting in front of audiences along with the presenters. So the closest partnerships there between presenters and agents and managers. And so we invited one of the most interesting and booking agent manager folks in our field to come and describe this work for you. So I'd like to introduce Greg Castleman from Unbound Artists, and he's going to give you an overview of booking agents, managers' work, what they do, and talk a little bit about the specificity of his work as well. And we had our first question in the chat from Krista, which we'll table and answer in a bit. But thank you for that question, Krista. Greg, take it away. Thanks for being here.
Sure thing. Oh, thank you, Bobby, for that beautiful introduction, and thank you all for being here. Again, my name is Greg Castleman. I use he, him pronouns. I am zooming in from San Francisco, California, on the unceded homeland of the Ramaytush Ohlone peoples. And behind me is just a very white-ish background because I'm using that beautiful filter that makes everything behind you kind of disappear. And I'm the founder of Unbound Artists. It's an agency and many things actually based here in San Francisco, but also with artists from around the world. I noticed a lot of you are zooming in from around the United States, but also around the world. So I also wanted to acknowledge that because my perspective isn't limited to the United States and Canada, but it's mostly driven by that. I know also a little bit about Mexico and Europe and some parts of South America, but today I think when I describe what an agent or manager does, I'm going to introduce that from the perspective of here in the United States and Canada to some degree. So, like a lot of the presentation has shared, agents and managers sometimes get inside of the same category. Sometimes they're very different. I've had the privilege of being both, so I can kind of describe the core similarities and the differences. I would say that, okay, so the booking agent, their role is really important for both presenters and for artists. For presenters, as Bobby was just explaining, the choice selection is huge. And so what agents get to do is they get to build relationships and build trust with presenters in order to help them navigate potential choices to make from either within their roster or in the field at large. And specifically in that roster, so my agency is a great example. I work with about 15 artist projects. Some agencies have dozens of artists or projects. Also, there are agents who work for artists or dance companies or for theatrical productions, and we call them in-house booking agents. So it really runs the gamut. So an agent may have a lot of offerings, or they may only have one or a few. A manager is really in that oversight level of an artist's career or an artist project's career at an executive level, and they're coordinating not just with presenters to book, either in an individual capacity or tours. I'll get back to that in a second, individual bookings or tours. Managers are probably coordinating with publicists, they're coordinating with production, they're coordinating at an executive level to support the artist's entire career. And as in this presentation, it was explained, they might be interfacing with presenters for different reasons in addition to the agents, maybe because of a residency program, maybe because of a grant application, maybe because of a donor event, and sort of facilitating a different kind of connection with the artist. So in terms of bookings that an agent might procure, it can be at an individual level. So think of a festival, right? Maybe you're working with a festival as a booking agent to provide talent for a specific stage or slot. But also, agents get to be involved in booking tours. And the difference between an individual booking and a tour is really the connection between different days and different events, different venues in different cities and towns. So you may have a kind of image of what a US road tour might look like, all the artists getting in a van and going from one theater to the next. But sometimes traveling is taking place just via flights, or sometimes inside of a metropolitan region. Some metropolitan regions are big enough that a tour can be in, LA, Orange County, San Diego, and they're just Ubering between the spots. So really a tour really just means a succession of different events and concerts or performances that take place in a consolidated period of time. And agents are often not just involved in booking individual performances, but also putting together the tours. And that's where the relationships with presenters are so important, because they have to be able to think through not just where's the best spot for an artist in a particular place, but how can I connect that with other opportunities for that artist in different places that can be derivable from each other, that one can fly from one to the other, et cetera. Going back to what managers do, it really can depend on the genre. Certainly in the classical music world, if you're involved in classical music, the border between what a manager does and an agent does is much, much, much smaller. If you're in the theatrical world, the difference between what a manager and an agent does is actually much wider. I can really speak the best to sort of the music concert booking industry. And one thing that managers are involved in that agents are not involved in typically is album releases. They can be involved in kind of project development, new shows, linking up with producers, linking up with marketing, branding companies, things like that. So the work that a manager does to help an artist release a new album, to develop a new project, can feed into what a booking agent does. Because the really interesting part of when there's a new project or a new record, it can be a lot of energy for one of the most important things that's being talked about today, which is the audience. When we think about serving the audiences, coming to see an artist that they love and adore, or an artist that they don't know about yet, the release of something new, an album, a project, something that can really spark a conversation about a presentation is oftentimes funneling really important parts of the marketing. And part of that job of marketing is to, not just engage with what an artist does so well, but why now? Why come buy the ticket now? Why come see the show now? And so that's just an interesting area where the work of managers connects with the work of booking agents, connects with the work of presenters. And the last thing that I'll share, because I think I'm running out of time, is that if you had to think about what's the most important role of an agent and manager, what is the most essential thing? I would say that it is trust. I would say that trust is what fuels and builds the relationships that agents have with presenters, and it fuels the relationships that they have with the artists that they represent. And trust building is about, and relationship building is about being good partners, really good listening, thinking and problem solving, taking responsibility, support, guidance, all of the things that engender trust, that build trust, because the relationship that a agent manager has with the presenter typically, or hopefully, is not just because of one booking, but continues over time. And I think one of the most beautiful things about our field, and you really feel that at APAP, is that, you're going to, APAP is doing amazing work all year round, but then in January, everybody convenes in the Midtown Hilton Hotel. It's typically very, very cold out, so everyone's huddled inside. And you see these faces and these human beings that are not just colleagues in the field, but they're friends. And that friendship comes from that place of trust, and the trust that's been built and engendered over months and years and decades sometimes. So I think that's where I'll end today, unless I have more time and I should share more.
Thank you so much, Greg, and stay pinned if you can, because I have a couple of questions. The first be, could you just describe very briefly what a typical day looks like for you? How are you connecting with presenters, maybe even at a conference, or just in your regular workday? And then also just talk very briefly and very generally about how booking agents and managers are funded, how that works as a business.
Okay. A typical day often involves a good number of phone calls or Zoom meetings scheduled with presenters and with artists. Certainly, if a booking agent is involved in not just procuring the bookings or developing the tours, but also the logistics, they've got to spend time on looking through contracts, supporting the advancing of shows, sometimes even supporting the marketing or the social media efforts of artists. So days are varied. And for me, I can just speak to my personal experience. I use a productivity hack called chunking, where I say, okay, I'm going to dedicate this 3 hours to this tour, or this 2 hours to contracting. Because if I don't do that, and I just sort of let the week sort of take me as it goes, I can't get it all done. There's so much work we have to do. It's probably, I think, one of the things that like agents and presenters and managers and artists, we all can like nod with each other about. It's just like how much it takes to really funnel into any performance that an audience gets to see, which they have oftentimes no idea of all of the work it takes to make that happen. And I think the second question is about funding. So I really bootstrapped when I started my own booking agency. I had saved money, and it was tough because oftentimes when a business model depends on commission, which is oftentimes what agency and management business models depend on, it's delayed income. And so you have to fund yourself and your staff until you start seeing income for your agency. So that's really in that for-profit bootstrapping model. Other agencies that are for-profits may find seed investors. They may raise money. They may do a Kickstarter. I mean, I think there's different ways to think about starting a business. But I would also say that there are definitely booking agencies and managers that are non-for-profits. And there's great examples of that in the field. And so they're applying for grants and tapping into funding through arts organizations to support their work.
Thank you for that. I wanted to speak actually very specifically to that last point and explain that a little bit. In the arts world, as a general rule, as it has been for a long time, the vast majority of presenters are not for-profit entities, meaning they're a part of a university or they're an independent 501c3, which means that they don't pay taxes on their income, and they are a nonprofit organization. On the other side of that, most of the booking agents and managers and the artists are also for-profit, which means they do pay taxes on that income. As Greg mentioned, there are a few booking agents and managers and some artists that are changing that model, who are building nonprofit boards and restructuring themselves in a way that allows them to be nonprofit, get other sources of funding, provide some tax relief. But that has been what I might even call an imbalance in our industry for a long time. So that's an interesting course of discussion and something to explore as you learn more about it. I would also say, if you're a presenter on this call, you may recognize especially if you're coming to a conference and if you're in a programming role, a power imbalance, a perceived power imbalance, because you're coming in, you know, as a presenter, talking to a booking agent, choosing artists for your venue or for your local audience, and the booking agent is in most cases offering and hoping that you will choose the artists that they have in this big marketplace that we do. I would urge you to not think about that or work as if you're in an imbalance. I can't stress, as someone who has been a presenter for 20 years, how important the work of booking agents and managers are, and how incredibly necessary they are to making our world work. And I will also say that we're going to talk about this a little bit more next week, but Greg hit the nail on the head when he talked about relationships and friendships. This is absolutely a relationship business. You're going to see the same people walking around that fountain in the Hilton lobby every year, or on the phone with you throughout your career. There will be more that come in and some that retire, but it is a community writ large. So make sure that as you're doing these negotiations, working with integrity, working with courtesy, all those things are incredibly important. So I would stress that for everybody on the call. And we'll talk about that a little bit more next week as it specifically relates to conference. But thank you so much, Greg. That was a great summary of the work. We can go to slide 5 now, which was, as I noted earlier, incorrectly named internal partners. We're going to call this local partners and talk a little bit. These are the roles that often are within a presenting organization, okay? And I'm going to talk about a few of them now, and then we'll hand it over to someone who's going to be more specific with it. We talked about development a little bit. Development or external relations, it's sometimes called, is the part of our work that brings the fuel to us in our world. They're the ones who are often filling out the grant applications, describing projects to foundations or to the public fundraising entities, or to individual donors, and attempting to get that funding to come to the presenter. They do all the reception. Many of the times they do receptions and other events for individual donors. They manage those relationships. They ensure that work is done with integrity. The fundraising field has a set of guidelines and ethics and professional standards that they use to ensure that their work is done in an ethical way, and they are responsible for that. Development is incredibly important in any organization. You may also see the executive or leader of an organization also being the fundraiser, or also being kind of the face of fundraising, but that's incredibly important work. And if you're on this call and you work in development, thank you for doing that, because it's so important and often very challenging and difficult work, building relationships, describing to donors the work, giving people with resources a reason to support your organization is very important. So that's what development does. Also incredibly important is making sure that the audience, which we know is the equally top importance with the artist, that the audience knows what's happening and decides to come and participate. So that job falls to marketers. They make sure that audiences are aware of performances, buy tickets. They do that through buying ads. They do that through public relations. They do that through websites and social media and email marketing, and making sure that as many people in your sort of target market, if it's an in-person event, obviously it has a regional focus, making sure that as many people as possible know about the performance and make the decision to come and perform. That's incredibly challenging and fascinating work. So the marketers are very important. Their work has evolved, I think, most significantly over the past 10 years to includes social media. That seems like there's a new social media app that comes up, every couple of weeks. It's not quite that often. I'm myself, unfortunately, very addicted to TikTok at the moment. But marketers use those new tools, use those new avenues for engaging folks, and make sure that people come to see the product, the artistic product that you're putting out as a presenter. Production and technical staff. If you have an artist on the stage and no one can hear or see them because there isn't any audio or lights, or the set doesn't work, or it's unsafe, that is nothing good is going to come from that. So the work of production technical folks are very important. They manage those logistical needs for the performances, make sure that the sound and lights and set projections, costumes, and all those other details work smoothly and safely. If you have a production person in your life, make sure to say thank you to them. Make sure to learn about what they do. Make sure to listen to them when they talk about safety. It's an incredibly important part of what we do. So very important role within the presenter. It can take many forms, from carpenters all the way to audio engineers, that sort of thing. Talking very briefly about community engagement. Community engagement is, I wouldn't call it a new part of our field, but it's a growing part of our field. It used to be that our work was more about bringing an artist in for a day, fly in, get them on the stage. They do their performance for however long the event is, a couple of shows, whatever it is, and then right off again. I think beginning a few years ago, arts organizations started realizing that they could, with artists, facilitate a relationship between the artists and the audience that wasn't just about performance. So how could we present more challenging work if we provided a context for it? How could we use the great virtuosi that are coming to our community to get young people excited about the arts? How could we get them to share their talent and expertise with budding young artists in our community? How could we start community conversations about difficult or challenging subject matter through the work of artists and with artists? And that is how community engagement was born. It used to be sort of sometimes called just education. It used to be sometimes called outreach. I think community engagement is the most recent term for that kind of work. And it's really anything that is non-performance that happens between the artists and the communities in which they're performing. It may take the form of a master class with a great violinist. It may take the form of taking a Chilean puppetry company into a youth center and building puppets with young people, which we've done before. I've done before in previous roles. It can take the form of engaging with students on your campus through conversations with artists, performances in dormitories, Q&A sessions, post-concert conversations, any of those things. So community engagement work, very important, growing part of being a presenter. If you have a community engagement person in your organization, you're lucky. If not, it is worth going to some sessions at the APAP conference if you get a chance to attend and learning more about community engagement. I'm sure there will be sessions that will help you engage your community more meaningfully. Many others on the that are important to the work. One that comes up is front of house audience services, making sure that tickets are purchased, making sure that people get to the right seats, making sure that everything stays safe in the house. Also incredibly important work. If you can think of any other roles that I have forgotten or we didn't list because we didn't have time, please put them in the chat. And also, I'm watching the questions in the chat, and we're going to save those up for the Q&A sections. But please continue to put questions in the chat as we go, so we have some questions preloaded for the Q&A section. I want to talk about the work of programming in a presenting role. And I brought, we asked a colleague of ours from the Clarice Smith Performing Arts Center to join us to talk about the work as what you do as a programmer and presenter. So I'd like to welcome Megan Pagado-Wells from the Clarice Smith Performing Arts Center at the University of Maryland to talk about how programming works and what she does in her role. So welcome, Megan, and take it away.
Great. Thanks, Bobby. And thank you for having me. Hello, everyone. As Bobby said, my name is Megan Pagado-Wells. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm joining in from College Park, Maryland, which is located right outside Washington, D.C. on the ancestral home of the Piscataway people. I am a medium-skinned Asian American woman with dark brown wavy hair, dark brown eyes, and I'm wearing a red and black floral top. I'm in an office setting with some empty IKEA picture frames leaned up against the wall behind me, and Felicia just chatted me privately. Go Terps, yes, yay. Terps, Terrapins are our mascot, yeah. So I am the co-director of artistic programming here at the Clarice Smith Performing Arts Center. We are based on the University of Maryland College Park campus, so we are a university presenter. We do have our own building that has 6 different venues, ranging from a 1,000-seat concert hall to a black box theater. And we also have some outdoor spaces that we program in as well. So along with my fellow co-director and our artistic planning team, we present a multidisciplinary performing arts series of about 25 to 30 performances throughout the academic year, as well as a few festivals. We also organize some non-performance-based programs, like a mini grant program that supports creation of new work by student artists. But that is generally what our portfolio of programs looks like at the moment. And as a programmer and a presenter, I'm in a role that is responsible for making decisions around how visiting artists interact with our community and our audiences. Again, as Bobby was just saying, whether that's through a performance or a masterclass conversation or another kind of interactive activity, and also making decisions and being responsible for those decisions about who those artists are. And these decisions are not made in a vacuum, and they shouldn't be. We are definitely in conversation with our community, with our audiences, artists and their agents and managers around what everyone's needs and desires are. And we're trying to create experiences that make sense, that set everyone up for success. I think in a lot of ways, there can be a perception that being a programmer is sort of like, oh, you get to, you can approach your work in a way where you can do what you want and you put stuff on a stage that is always what you love. But in a lot of ways, I see my role as being a facilitator of sort of what I'm hearing from a lot of different people, whether locally here in our community or broadly from artists and their agents and managers. So,
oh, Megan, she's a she, her. That makes me happy.
What comes with that is discussing and negotiating agreements with artists and agents. So agreeing on a scope of work, and what that looks like is, you know, number of performances, what those community workshops look like, and also what very tactically, what is the schedule, load in, rehearsal, load out, how much time do we have in the venue, that sort of thing. We're also talking about artist hospitality. That's a role that is really vitally important and a part of the team where you have people who are at a presenter who are responsible for booking those hotel rooms, that local ground transportation, making sure that artists are getting from their accommodations to all the different activities that you have planned and have had agreed on, or feeding the artists or preparing their green rooms, all of that different kind of hospitality. And also, of course, the artist fee. You know, what is our financial commitment to the artists? Plus, a lot of other fun things that I'm sure Greg can also tell you about, like insurance and force majeure cancellation policies. Just making sure that we're coming to an equitable agreement. That is definitely something that I see as falling to me as working in programming. Again, these decisions are not made in a vacuum. I'm in conversation with internal/local partners, everyone who was on that slide that Bobby was just sharing before: production, guest experience, artist services, marketing, development, just to make sure that what I'm saying to the artist and their agent or manager is actually true, and that we can follow through on what I'm agreeing to on behalf of the organization. So whether that's the payment schedule and just making sure that, like, yes, we can do a deposit of this X amount, or, yes, we can give you access to that amount of rehearsal space that you need. I kind of see, again, all of that being a conversation with my colleagues, but ultimately really being responsible for all of that, of what we are telling the artists that we're able to provide. And I also see my role as having that same sort of responsibility back to my colleagues and making sure that they have the information that they need, or at least the context that they need to be able to fulfill their roles. They know who to contact on the artist side when it comes to whatever it is: hotel rooms, lighting, sound, all of that kind of stuff. I don't really want to be like gatekeeping that information. There's a point where, yes, everyone should just talk. And, I want to make sure that I'm not keeping any of that information from my colleagues. So my day-to-day varies a lot, but usually consists of some sort of combination of artist research, which can look like connecting with artists and their agents/managers about their upcoming projects, what might be touring in upcoming seasons. Also meeting with internal partners, again, like production, marketing departments, et cetera, about upcoming shows, as well as artists that we're thinking about working with in future seasons. So like a lot of you already probably do, we're addressing issues that are coming up for a show next week while thinking about what we're going to be doing in March 2025, which is sort of a trippy thing. You're sort of like, what fiscal year am I thinking about right now? But, that's the fun of it. And of course, along with that artist research is attending conferences, festivals, performances, building those relationships, connecting with artists and agents, and basically getting a sense of, what artistic experiences are going to align with organizational goals or be a really great fit for our audiences, programs, and venues. So I think that's the general gist, and I might stop there if that's okay, just for now.
Sure, thank you. That's excellent. A couple of maybe one question to, if you don't mind, Megan, can you talk a little bit specifically about the process for bringing voices into your planning process, maybe even specifically around students and your work at Maryland specifically?
Yeah, absolutely. One very specific example of doing that is that we have a festival called Next Now Fest that opens our season every year. It is at the beginning of September, so the beginning of the academic year. And we started it specifically to target students. We found that a lot of students were coming to our performances, but most of them were performing arts students. And we knew that there were so many other people on our campus that were engaged in creative activities, but either didn't see themselves here for whatever reason coming to our Performing Arts Center. So we decided to start a festival, an arts festival that really welcomed everyone on campus and also invited genres beyond the performing arts to perform here. So we partner with student organizations beyond the performing arts in film, in fashion, in comedy, in indie rock, at least beyond the academic arts that are supported here in the building. And we also work directly with students to curate that festival. So they are pitching artist ideas, they are doing artist research, they're also forming those partnerships with student organizations. So it really does become a festival for students by students, and not a festival that sort of like we're creating at students and hoping that they're sort of vaguely interested in what we're doing. So that's one very clear, direct example of a way that we're identifying an audience that we'd really love to serve and meet the needs of, that also have needs that we can meet, and involving them in how we design that program.
Thank you, Megan. Appreciate that. I would say one of the most important things that Megan talked about as a programmer is not just programming things that you like. I have been passionate about bluegrass my entire life, but don't get a chance very often to program it. And if I just did a whole season of bluegrass, I would be leaving out significant portions of whatever audience I might be presenting for. So I think it's about having a well-developed and well-researched personal aesthetic that serves the institution and the audiences and the communities that your presenting organization serves and its mission. So that's a good way to think about programming. And as you go to conference, we'll talk about conference again next week, but as you go to conference, make sure you stretch yourself in showcases and exploration beyond the things that you know you're going to like, and think about them in the context of your community rather than just whether or not you personally like them. So important work. Thank you for that. Programming is it can be the very romantically fun kind of like, oh, it's glamorous, we get to see a bunch of performances, but it can also, it's very much sort of the workaday thing too, if you do it correctly. So so think about that. In the next section, James, we're going to do a very quick overview of kind of the financial work that takes place to bring an artist to the stage. And James has some documents that he can show that we'll explain together to give you an overview, a very simple overview of how that works.
Thanks, Bobby. We will note that, of course, everyone budgets a little differently. Everyone's overhead expenses are unique to their own organization, but there are a few commonalities amongst the budgeting process that we thought may be beneficial to think through. Knowing that you want to engage an artist, you've done your research, you found someone that you think fits right for your community, you know who their agent artists are, you've kind of talked about it, and you're ready to make an offer. The first thing you'll want to do is to create an offer, a formal offer letter that you would present to the appropriate person, whether it's the artist themselves or the agent manager that you're working through. Offers take many different forms. Some agents and managers have a form that they want you to fill out via either via their website, or they'll want you to send an email with an attachment to it. Sometimes they're kind of short, sometimes they're a little more in-depth, but we have a couple of examples here that we'll share that we want to highlight just as ways that you can make an offer to bring an artist to your community. And I think, let me just do a quick share screen here.
Marty Manager is an important leader in our business. Get to know him for sure.
Yeah, well, if you're nice to Marty Manager, he'll buy you a drink at the bar at APAP. So he's someone you really want to get to know pretty quickly. This is just a very simple letter that you could use to make an offer. Dear Marty, it will include the things that you definitely need, which artist you want to bring to your community. If there is a specific repertoire that or program that you want to bring, that's specifically relevant if you're booking dance performances. If you're bringing Martha Graham to your community, they have a very large catalog which they choose, and you may be interested in a very specific performance that you want to contract in for that that specific day. So you want to make sure that you're putting that in there if that is indeed something that is very, very important to you. You may not necessarily have a preference. You may be open to whatever is touring or to what they're focusing on during that period of time. But if you do, be sure you put that in there. Helpful hint, if you are looking for a very specific dance performance, you're looking for a very specific thing from that artist, talk to the agent manager or the artist well in advance of submitting the offer. Don't surprise them during the offer that you need something very specific, because sometimes that affects routing. Sometimes that means they have to go back in and redo some work. So, make sure that you have that conversation well in advance. Date and time is important. They need to know what date they're going to, and what time the show starts, that they're going to need to be in your community. Venue. Sometimes this is the same, Lake Placid Center for the Arts organization is the same. We own a venue, it's the same thing, but oftentimes you'll need to put the specific venue in there because you may not own your own facility, you may be renting, or you may be doing it in an offsite location. They also need to know where the artists need to show up to when they arrive in your community and have an idea of the venue size. Fee. Again, this most likely will be negotiated out at least closely in advance, but you won't be surprised. The least surprises in this is the better. $17,500 guaranteed, plus 75% of gross box office receipts over 48,000. It could be a flat fee. You could be offering a percentage of the door. You could be offering cookies and ice cream only. Whatever the offer is, the financial offer is, make sure that that is included in here. And there are some additional terms you'll want to put in. Is transportation included in here as well? Hotel rooms. How many rooms and how many nights is vitally important. So don't just put hotel, because as a presenter, that can be very loosely interpreted. And if they want 3 nights for a 22 company dance, 22 member dance company, that is a much different financial investment that you'll be making into housing when you only have budgeted for 1 night. So, make sure that you're being as specific as possible so that no one down the line, no one is confused, or no one feels taken advantage of during the process. Are you providing backline and production support as noted in the technical writer? Have you made adjustments to the technical writer and agreed on different terms because of what your venue is able to provide? Make sure that if you are adapting the technical writer, that you have had a conversation about it, that you've agreed to it, that you both signed off on it, and that you're including a note about that in the offer letter, and most likely attaching the technical writer with those revisions to this. Again, so everyone has clarity going into it and there's no surprises. Do you have an exclusivity tour? 60 days, 60 miles is fairly common. Sometimes it's 90 days, 90 miles. Sometimes it's very specific to include very specific cities, and that's it. Every venue has their own different uniqueness when it comes to what you're comfortable with. And every geographic location is different. Here in Placid, I have a 60-mile, 60-day standard clause that we build into contracts. However, Burlington, Vermont is 45 miles from me, but it takes 3 hours to get there by car because you have to take a ferry over a giant lake. So my exclusivity clauses exclude Burlington from any of my work because it's impractical most times for audiences to, we're not going to overlap audiences, or they're not going to steal from me and I'm not going to steal from them. So, everyone is unique. And then a time that you need to, when does this offer expire? Please respond within an X number of business days, or, give them a date. If any of the parties need more time to settle things out, you can have that conversation via email, but this allows you to move on if it's been a period of time and you haven't heard anything, or nudge them again and say, hey, any word on that offer? They'll need to do some work on their end once they receive it, but they will be able to get back to you. That's one way you can do do an offer letter. I also have, I find it's faster for me not to, just to have a templated format where I can plug things in, because that's just a little more of how my brain works. And I will pull up just an alternative artist offer letter that you could potentially use. One moment while I share screen there. So this is just an alternative version with kind of the same thing. It just doesn't have dear, Marty manager there, but it's basically the same thing. The date, the expire letter. See, there's Marty's name. Performance details. Susie, the singer, is coming in here. Presenter information for a contract, venue information for performance aspects. Terms, there's that 15,000 flat guarantee, plus below, production and sound provided per rider, hotel accommodations, airfare, are you providing a hot meal, ground transport, and then any arts education and outreach that you may be doing, which is a note. If you want the artist to come in and do 3 workshops the day before the performance, that's something that should be negotiated out during the offer process so that it is factored both into the artistic fee, the hotel accommodations for you, and everyone really just knows what we're talking about. We would advise, as much as you can, not surprise anyone with an additional community engagement activity during the contracting process. It's very much appreciated to do that. Also, be very upfront with your agent, manager, or artist. If you're getting grant funding that requires you to do a community engagement activity, and especially if that engagement activity is it's pre-described by anything. A lot of regionals will require you to have an engagement activity as a part of the funding process. So, be very upfront that we received this grant. We need to have this kind of engagement activity. And if you're unsure of what that artist may offer, the agent manager, I find, is usually spectacular at working with you through what you need for your community and helping you really craft something that's going to not only fulfill the requirement of that grant and allow you to check that box, but do something that really enhances the performance itself. Once you get this off, and once you've agreed on an artist fee and you kind of know what your expenses are, it is time to do your budget. And most likely you have already started your budget well before that process, because you'll need to know about what you can afford to offer in that offer letter. I will show you just an example. Everyone budgets differently because everyone's overhead is a little different, but we do have a quick example of just a rough and tumble budget here. Pull it. This is modified from an actual budget of someone a colleague of ours that helped us with a rough template, And again, everyone's earned income lines will be a little different because you may be offering services or offering avenues for earned income that are different than your colleagues, but typically it's ticket sales, things like concession and bar, any merchandise. If you're doing a community engagement activity like a school show or some master classes, and you're charging the public for those, there is some additional revenue potential there, as well as ways of finding contributed support for that performance. Usually those typically land in individual, foundation, government, or corporate support. And government can be anything from state level funding to federal funding from the NEA or the Institute of Humanities, or a variety of options there. So that you put those two things together to get your total revenue and support. And then, of course, you have your programmatic expenses. Your artist fee, that's what you're going to put in that offer letter. And once you've gotten it approved, especially if you've negotiated, you put it back in this form. Technical fees. So are there any additional technical personnel that you're going to need to bring in to help facilitate that performance? Do you have any equipment rental? Do you need to rent some lights or some microphones or something that will, a special piece of equipment that the artist requires in order to make that performance really happen. Marketing and promotion. How much are you going to put into your social media ads? Or do you need to do any buyouts? Other program expenses. Do you need to feed the artists? Do you need to provide food and hospitality? Do you have anything that, do you need to buy a special curtain? Do they require, are you out of towels in the green room? If it's a dance or a concert performance, do you need to go buy some towels to so the artists don't sweat everywhere? Whatever you need, make sure you fill that in. If there's an additional community engagement activity and the fee is not included in your artist fees, there's a space for that. You know, again, everyone's needs are different in these items, but these are just some common programmatic expenses that may occur for your individual performance. On top of that, you do have the option, depending on how your organization is budgeting, whether you're or what you're building into your administrative and organizational overhead versus are you needing to fully account for everything on a performance by performance basis. You know, office supplies, materials, and equipment. You know, are you allocating the purchase of the copy machine over every performance throughout a year? You know, is insurance, is your commercial liability, do you need to pick up a piece of that in an individual performance, or is that built into your overhead? So you know, these are some things to consider as you're kind of how you want to budget for your performances. Do you need to allocate a portion of your time, your production manager's time, into the individual performances to get a true accounting of what you need to cover in order to make your to be okay at the end of the day from an individual performance perspective, or is that in your administrative, you know, your organizational overhead? All things to consider, and everyone's going to handle it just a little bit differently. But then you have your total expenses, and then you can see kind of where you're at the end of the day in your planning process. How much do you really need to bring in from earned and contributed revenue in order to cover your expenses? The other, you know, what's not in this is a lot of organizations have a line that's called cash from operating. So a lot of times, you know, the expenses will outweigh the revenue potential, especially if for organizations that may have a more limited budget or are bringing in an artist with a more substantive fee. So they will, on a show-by-show basis, allocate money from the unrestricted funds from the operating budget into a performance budget to cover the gap. Very common practice. But that is just a rough overview of how budgeting may work for an organization sometimes. And Bobby, I'll throw it back over to you for the next section.
Thank you so much. We're going to have a quick Q&A. We have a couple of questions queued up already. So if we could pin Megan and Greg in as well, and we'll go through those questions. But if you have questions from any part of the presentation or beyond it, now is the time to ask it, and one of us will hopefully have the answer for you. And we'll start with a question for Greg from Aaron Myers, who says, "What advice would you give to artists who want to present at venues? Who should they contact first? What key info should they provide, etc.?" Greg, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, well, I'm not pinned, but you can still hear my voice, so that is all okay. So first of all, oh, there I am. There are some incredible self-represented artists out there, and while the agent manager field, as Bobby and others have said today, is a vital part of this, I think there are also some artists that really are able to do it on their own. And so if an artist is asking me as an agent manager what they could have really in order to, you know, best represent what they do, I would answer it by saying, most importantly, having video. You know, your music or your art or your, you know, anything is so important. What you're doing to release albums or photo galleries or all sorts of things, but for presenters of live performance, they're going to need that sense of understanding your live presence, the imprint of the show, what it might look like on different kinds of stages. So I think video is king in a lot of ways, and I think it continues to be. I think the second thing to have is a really consolidated pitch package that could look like a one sheet. It could look like a prospectus. It could look like a list of testimonials from presenters who've worked with you, or press quotes you've been able to garner for your work. I think having some sort of pitch package, and it can be like, there are so many different ways to create that. I think that's really, really important. And I guess the third thing, because I could keep going on and on and on and on forever and ever and ever, but I just trying to think of like the most essentials. I think having a really clear technical writer to help presenters budget and think about if their production teams are able to support your vision for your live show. I think that's really, really essential to have as well. But I guess your question is also advice. Like, what advice would you give to artists who want to present at your venues? Be your authentic self. Don't try to pretzel yourself into something that you're not. Presenters and audiences care about authenticity. So that's I'd start there.
Thanks, Greg. So used to, we would come home from conference with big bags full of catalogs from every booking agent that had their roster, sometimes with CDs. And then for a while, everybody had thumb drives. I remember coming home with like a handful of thumb drives. And now we're into QR codes, I think. But what's the format that's being used, or where are we headed with how we're sharing that information these days?
I think that we're moving faster and faster and faster into a no paper world, but I definitely found for example, I was at the Western Arts Alliance conference this year, and I met with a bunch of presenters, and I let them know, I was saying, it's a no paper year for Unbound. And there was a like, oh, but I really depend on that piece of paper, because I take a stack of papers back with me and I lay them out on my desk, and it helps me remind me of the conversations that I have and the interest that I have. So in that, I realized, I think my intention was good from an eco-friendly perspective and another perspective, but maybe there's a way to balance those two things together. Potentially, I could have maybe a little postcard or a little business card, something to give in person. I think QR codes are excellent, because maybe it also is a way of really bridging the paper world with the digital world. But I don't think that any presenters, correct me if I'm wrong, Bobby, James, Megan, I don't think presenters want CDs. I don't think that presenters want really thick packages that like are really hard to pack and take back home. So I think thinking about light, eco-friendly, and really helpful conference materials is the way to go.
Awesome, thanks.
I do want to add something about video. Definitely agree, video content. And I would say that for myself, I find it most helpful if the video is as close to the live experience as possible. Sometimes artists only have very highly stylized music video type, produced content, which is, I think, great to sort of see how the artist sees themselves and sort of the visual, sort of what their desired visuals are. But what I find most helpful is literally seeing what that ensemble or whatever looks like on a stage, maybe with people in the house too, ideally with people in the house too, like a live performance, because that is something that is helpful to me to see how that energy flows, but also is really helpful for my production colleagues to see, okay, all right, so what they have here definitely matches what's on their stage plot, and I kind of see like how the rig is, so it's just helpful across the board to have that type of video in addition to everything else.
For sure. I'll take a lower production quality live video over a stylized music video that doesn't really explain what the audience is going to get any day. A couple other questions. Lucy Bertrand says, how to book tours, any tools that you use? I'm assuming, Lucy, you're talking about databases and those kind of things. I think this is again for Greg. Greg, what kind of digital tools do you use in your work? You have a database somewhere, I know, because I think I'm in it.
Yes. All right. Well, there's different kinds, but one that a lot of booking agents or managers use is called a CRM. And that helps to manage their contacts and to oversee their e-lists. Sometimes agents and managers will want to send out e-marketing to kind of send out general updates and notes. Sometimes they just want to be able to send or make individual outreaches through phone calls and emails. And I think having a database, it actually doesn't have to be a CRM if you don't feel comfortable, using something like Salesforce or OnePage or all these different kinds of Zoho. There's also just using a spreadsheet, having a spreadsheet where you can have the information that you need and separate it in lists and in regions. It's just, there's all these different types of ways. I think it depends on your scale and what you're looking for. The question was about that, correct? There's nothing else, no other part of the, okay. Yeah. Oh, and then conferences. If you're attending a conference, if you're a member of like APAP or you're attending a conference, you will receive some sort of attendee list, and that attendee list can then become a part of your contacts that you have in your CRM or in your spreadsheet. So that's another important way of, and tools like Indie on the Road or Polestar. Bands in town. There's a lot of resources out there also to aggregate information about talent buyers and presenters that are out there. Musical America.
Felicia Barlow Clar asks, do you recommend a one-page pitch packet over a multi-page media type kit? Yeah.
I can answer that, and then I'm sure that you all have answers as well. So I have a hack that I would share with any agent or manager out there. This is free, 100% free. Try to design your pitch in a way in which the marketing teams for presenters are going to find most useful. Because when presenters work with agents to select those artists and they're so excited, they then typically, not always, but typically really depend on their marketing teams to help get the word out there. And what is a marketing team going to want to understand about an artist right off the bat? Press quotes, short bios of different sizes, testimonials, high resolution photos, just like what is that event page going to be including? How can we gear them to thinking about the lead photo that represents an artist or a show versus live photos? So I think it doesn't really have to be a one page or a multi-page kit. Maybe sometimes you want a multi-page kit because it's a prospectus for something that's really detailed and you can't fit it all into one page. That's okay. I do think that shorter is always better, and brevity and conciseness really helps me. I think, again, empathizing with what presenters go through on a daily basis, trying to kind of ingest and really quickly understand something. They just don't have time to read like a Bible. I mean, maybe they may take time out of their days to read the Bible or a Bible, but I mean, what we're providing shouldn't be that kind of length. And I think that that's really important from a perspective of design.
Definitely. Thanks for that. And I want to just amplify something that Krista just said in the chat, which is to do your research on presenters and attendee lists that you receive before conference and tailor your messaging to them and their venues. So go to the venue, look at what they program. If it's completely different from, if your artists that you're representing are completely different than anything they've programmed in the past decade, they might not need to receive one email a day from you from the time you get their name into a conference, because they're dealing with, as Greg has indicated, some definite information overload as presenters. And we'll talk about that. I keep putting in plugs for next week, but we'll definitely talk about how to manage that as you're heading into conference. We probably have time for maybe one more question before we go into the next section. If anybody has anything burning in their mind that they wanted to put into the chat. I would also say, I think we made the templates and the presentation available to attendees last time. I would ask Willie and Chris if we can do that again this year. The budget templates and the offer letter templates as well. Any other questions that are coming up before we move into the next section? All right, well, we're now going to move into the next section, and James is going to lead us through presenting Jeopardy.
This is also my audition to take Ken Jennings' place on the syndicated version of Jeopardy. So let's see if we can get me on national TV in a way that won't be terrifying. So we are going to play a little bit of Jeopardy here. Let me do a quick share screen. There we go. So we have our categories, acronyms, general terms, people, things in a contract, and festivals. So we will show you the answer. Of course, you will tell us the question. If you know and want to chime in, just throw your response in a chat, and we will. Bobby, I think that's the best way. Bobby will monitor the chat, and we'll let him yell it out.
That sounds great, and we're not keeping score, and nobody can win or lose. So.
I was going to offer you to put your voice on the voicemail of the winner, but we'll.
Nobody wants that.
So, Bobby, why don't you pick our first category?
I'll take people for 100.
Any professional who works on behalf of an artist to represent, promote, and sell their work.
Got it. Marianne says, what is an agent or manager? Perfect, Marianne. Good job.
There you go. Marianne, do you want to pick the next category, or we can let Bobby do that as well?
I'll let Bobby do it.
Okay.
We'll do things in a contract for 200.
Someone who signs a contract, therefore creating a legal obligation.
This is a hard one. Greg Castleman got it. What is a signatory?
A signatory, yes.
Good job, Greg. Pick the next category.
Okay, festivals for 300.
You guys are getting ambitious. For 17 days and nights each spring, this festival fills Charleston with performances by renowned artists, as well as emerging performers in opera, theater, dance, and chamber, symphonic, choral, and jazz music.
It looks like Gage Baxter buzzed in early and got it right with the Spoleto Festival. USA, got the exact name. Good job, Gage. We'll do general terms for 200 for the next one.
A list of instructions that allow a venue, as well as the backstage personnel who might work the gig, to be ready for your technical requirements.
We had about 40 people get that one, but the first person was Anne Camille Hirsch, who said, what is a tech writer? That is correct.
Everyone
Good job. Let's do acronyms for 500. How's that?
NAPAMA, NAPAMA.
This is a good one. This is an important one. Time.
The North American Performing Arts Managers and Agents.
So NAPAMA is an important organization that partners often with APAP, but is the organization that serves specifically agents and managers. They are often represented at APAP and have their own meetings and convenings as part of it too. Great organization. But can we do people for 300?
The department within an organization tasked with raising the supplemental income that goes towards a presentation.
Marianne Lacrosse says, what is development?
Very good.
Got it. Festivals for 500?
This is the official registered charity name that support Edinburgh's Three West Festival every August.
I think that's 3-week festival.
Yes, but I think it's supposed to be, I was like 3 West.
I don't know the official name.
We'll
Anybody?
We'll call time. This one's tough.
Edinburgh Festival Fringe Society. That's often shortened as the Fringe.
Yep.
Acronyms. Want to do acronyms for 1, 2, 3?
Acronyms for 100. APAP.
Krista's typing furiously. No. Association of Performing Arts Professionals. Thank you, Marianne.
We'll switch over to things in a contract because we haven't hit too many of those for 400. Getting somewhere over land instead of on water or in the air. For example, from the venue to the hotel.
And Camille, you got it as ground transportation. Good job. Cherie, you got it as well. Ground transportation is sort of defined separately from travel, because travel means getting to the place where you're going to be, the city or the locale where the event happens, but then getting from the hotel and all those other places is usually called ground transportation. So often travel is defined differently than ground transportation.
Things that are easy to mess up when you're new is the difference between the two of those.
For sure. What's next?
Let's do acronyms for 3. WA.
Excellent. Western Arts Alliance. The first person to get it was Barrett Newman. Good job.
Good job, Barrett. We'll bounce around now. We'll do general terms for 400. Refers to everything the musicians need to perform except the PA system, microphones, and stage monitors.
Cherie got it. Backline.
Backline, good job. Things in a contract for 500, so we'll test our skills here. A contractual deal point that ensures an artist does not perform within a certain number of miles surrounding your venue within a certain time frame before or after the event.
Excellent. I think all of these are right. Radius clause, blackout clause, exclusivity, but radius clause is the most commonly used.
Yeah. We'll do people for 500. The title given to the person who is directly communicating with the artist regarding offers to perform.
Agent. And Camille was the first. That's correct. Responsible agent.
Responsible agent. We'll do general terms for 5. A deal in which the producer is essentially renting the theater from the presenter. Presenters typically receive their fixed expenses, ticket commissions, and possibly a very small percentage of any overage. The producer assumes all the risk.
Barrett says, what is a 4-wall rental?
There you go.
Nice work, Barrett.
We'll go to acronyms for 4.
Oof. We went old school.
We did go
AKUKA.
old school there.
What is AKUKA? We're going to have to reveal this one, I'm afraid.
The Association of College, University, and Community Arts Administrators.
That was the predecessor to APAP.
Yeah.
That was old school APAP, as Greg calls it.
We should have
Thanks.
made that 5.
Yeah.
Festivals for 4. Held in Montreal each summer. This is the first North American International Festival dedicated to circus arts.
Anybody? Nope.
Montreal Compliment Cirque. Held
Nice.
usually the second and third week of July. And Bobby, I think we probably have time for one more before we wrap up. So I'll let you pick.
Let's do people for 4. How's that?
A professional who oversees the onstage logistics and coordinates all activities to ensure enough resources on hand.
Stage manager, tech director, production manager.
Sometimes interchange, sometimes organizations, technical director and production manager sometimes overlap. It's a Venn diagram there. So depends a little on your organizational resources there. So Bobby, I think I'll stop the screen share and we'll send it back over to you.
Thank you to everybody for joining us today. I want to thank our guests, Megan and Greg, for joining us. And I want to thank our interpreters, Avery and Darlene. And I want to thank Krista and Willie from APAP for having us all here and providing this opportunity for us to learn. Please join us for the next 2 sessions. The next one is next Thursday, and we'll be talking specifically about how to survive and thrive at conference. And then we have one a little later in November that's talking about the future and the parts of our industry that are changing. And we'll have a great panel of folks to talk about new ways of working in the arts. So please join us for both of those. Willie, I believe there's a survey as well, potentially, and any other information that you want to give before we sign off.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you to everyone here, to our guest speakers, our interpreters, and our wonderful hosts. Thank you all for attending this afternoon. I did just drop in the chat a post-session survey. We would love to hear your feedback as we continue to assess our future programming. For more information about upcoming programming, you can always go to apap365.org/programs. Again, thank you all for attending, and I hope you all have a wonderful afternoon.